Hi, and welcome to a Small Medium at Large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Hyson, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank my son Richard, my daughter Nancy, for posting and preparing the podcast for all of you. I want to thank all our listeners for liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, and hanging in with us for 3 years now. We're 3 years on this podcast. So, welcome to 2025, episode 88. I want to mention we have two exciting guests coming up in the next couple of months. We have Dean Radin returning to talk to us about his latest experiments. And we have Marilyn Schlitz coming to talk about her new bestseller, Love Study. And we have a host of other guests already lined up that are interesting people from all different parts of the country. So we look forward to seeing you and having more fun together in the future and this wonderful year ahead. Let me tell you about our special guest today. Sean McNamara has trained people in psychic development for many years, specifically in telekinesis, remote viewing, telepathy, out-of-body experiences, and lucid dreaming. He is the author of Path of the Golden Teacher, Renegade Mystic, Dewdrops of Infinity, and Blue Thumb. These books are available to help people train themselves at home, and he has also created several online courses. Sean McNamara is also a meditation teacher, and he makes his living as a clinical mental health counselor for clients in Colorado. You can learn more about him and his resources at www.M lowercase ind P lowercase OSSIBLE.com. Today, we'll be talking about Sean's newest book, Path of the Golden Teacher. But before we welcome Sean, I would like to read two quotes from his book that really resonated for me because I've done meditation in the past, I've done psychedelics in the past, and there were things I've had questions about or things that have driven me crazy about some of these things. And two of his quotes really sat well and resonated, and I just want to share them with you before we bring him on. Releasing perfectionistic tendencies will keep your path organic and propel you with curiosity and inspiration instead of unreasonable expectations or unhealthy self-disciplining. And I know I do that to myself. And last quote is, we prioritize information originating outside ourselves over information arising from within. And this is something that I always talk about, how we have to listen to our inner voice. And the more we listen to it, the stronger it gets. So I just had to share those quotes from him. And I also have to say, it's so wonderful. This is our returning guest and a very new dear friend. So let's welcome Sean here today. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Gail. It's great to be back with you again. It's always great to hear from you. I think last time we were in touch, you were really supportive when my dad passed recently. You sent me a loving care package, and it was so great to receive that from you, and I'm really grateful.
Well, I wanted to be able to touch you however I could from California to Colorado, but I am planning another visit out this year. So at some point, you'll see me in 2025.
That's
And that's the
great.
beauty of this podcast is that I'm having all these new friends come into my life, and you are one of those very special people. So,
Yeah,
oops, I'm just very, very grateful.
yeah, me too.
So I want to start off with the first question I have here, and I have a whole bunch of questions for us. You've written three books that relate to psychedelics in some way, and Path of the Golden Teacher is the most recent one. Is there a connection between them? Do you find that there is something that this is like a progression and now you're at this point? And if you could share with us what that is.
Yeah, in a way, every book I've written has been a marker in a stage of my life. Even from the very first book that was about telekinesis, each one, it's as if I'm just living my life and I'm just sharing whatever I learn. I'm sharing it out as fast as I keep going along. But with regard to the psychedelic books, the first one was Dewdrops of Infinity, and that was 2 or 3 years ago now. And that was a book that recorded Yeah, there it is. It was a year-long study that I did with some friends to see if psychedelics could improve psychic perception. And so the records of all the tests, all the transcripts, all the test targets are in there. And to do that experiment, I had to learn how to grow my own psychedelic mushrooms. I was like, okay, I want to do an experiment with psychedelics. Where do I get them? So I had to learn how to grow them. And I looked at a lot of different online resources, and sometimes they didn't agree, or they're a little bit confusing. And by the time I was done writing, with the experiments using the psychedelic and then publishing that book, I thought, I have all this great information on how to grow mushrooms, because I'd grown a lot of mushrooms by the time that was all done, and grown them in different ways. I thought, why not write a book showing people how to grow them? Because even though you could just go online and look up instructions, they're confusing. So I thought, I'm going to write a book, fill it with tons of photographs to make it as easy as possible, and just put it out there. I mean, it's nothing new. There are other books on how to grow them, but I wanted to contribute my experience and with my teaching style. So I put that out there. So that was my second book on psychedelics, and that one's the one called Blue Thumb: How to Grow Psychedelic Mush or How to Grow Psilocybin Mushrooms at Home.
I have this one right.
Yeah,
Yes, here we
yeah,
are. Here's the
uh-huh.
lovely cover. Very
Yeah. That's my thumb right there on the cover. Yeah.
in case we have to find
And
you.
and it's something. So the third book, the one we're really talking about today, Path of the Golden Teacher, it's really the outcome of something that started happening back when I was doing the psychic experiments with psychedelics, because I started my process with microdosing psilocybin. So that's taking a really small dose on a regular basis to affect subtle changes in the brain for psychological benefit
Can I
and mental.
interrupt you just for one
Sure.
second there? Because I
Mhm.
learned something very important in your book about this, which I don't know if other listeners have heard about this, but when I was thinking of microdosing, I was one of those people that was thinking, oh, yeah, maybe you do one a little bit here or you do a little bit there. But that's not where you're finding the results, which I do want you to share with us what the results were when you were doing this yourself. But important to let people know microdosing doesn't mean you do it 2 times that week and that's it. You did microdosing. That's not how it's done. And I really did not know that until I read your book. So if you could just share about how microdosing really is done.
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to, because there's a lot of misinformation about that. Some people, there are places where people are selling so-called microdosing capsules with maybe a third of a gram inside of a capsule, and they're selling 3 or 5 capsules at a time. They're not really selling you microdoses. They're just selling you a psychedelic dose broken into small capsules. Um, and so, it's sort of like a wink, wink. Here's some microdoses. That's not really what they're selling you or what you're being given. And some people will take a microdose, meaning somewhat less of a psychedelic dose, and they're going to go out to a concert. They're going to go to a party or out to dinner. They want to have a good time. So they want to feel some of the psychedelic effects, but not have a full-blown trip. That's still not technically a microdose,
Mhm.
although some people describe it that way. A microdose, you should not feel any of the psychedelic effects.
Exactly.
You might feel an uplift in mood, and that's the antidepressant quality of it. You might feel a boost in creativity, a reduction in anxiety, and it's not instant. So one capsule is not going to do it. This is affecting change because of the plasticity, the neuroplasticity in the brain. It's promoting that new growth so that the brain can get through life better. And so microdosing can take weeks or months to affect that change. And you would take a dose several times per week. You need to take a break every 3 or 4 days or so because your body can develop tolerance to it.
Mhm.
Um, and then it's very small doses, and you have to find the amount that works for you, do it for a long period of time. And that's what happened to me during those experiments. I didn't know what to expect. I was just measuring psychic ability and taking psychic tests and seeing if the scores would change. But then one day I woke up after about 5 or 6 weeks of microdosing, and I realized it felt like a heavy lead blanket had been lifted off my shoulders, and I felt happy. And it continued. And I asked my wife, I'm like, is this is this how normal people feel? And she said, yeah, that's normal. I said, I think I've been depressed most of my life and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it. And the same thing with anxiety. This anxiety that I've had most of my life, just it lessened. It didn't go away all the way, but it lessened to a significant degree because of the microdosing. So, and I know these days there are a lot of studies out there saying maybe it's the placebo effect. Maybe it's not the mushroom. Um, and for me personally, I don't care.
You're right.
I had a beautiful life-changing outcome from microdosing the psychedelic mushroom. So I'm
But you
really
did it
grateful for
over
that.
a period of time. It wasn't a week's worth. It was
No.
months of dedicated microdosing, and
Mhm.
obviously it wasn't getting you into any kind of altered state. It was
Mhm.
just sort of lifting, like you said, a veil or a heaviness off of you.
Yeah,
There's something you talked about that in the book. And I don't mean to be jumping. We'll jump around anyway.
sure.
It was something about you had very positive results when you did something called stacking.
Hmm.
And I was wondering if you could explain what stacking is
Hmm.
and what your positive results were.
Sure. Well, stacking is when you combine two or more substances for desired effect. And I was doing what's called the Stamets stack, named after Paul Stamets, who's a very famous mycologist these days. He
Mhm,
recommends taking the lion's mane mushroom with psilocybin because lion's mane has shown clinically some promise with promoting cognitive wellness and improving memory function. So I was taking lion's mane with the psilocybin. These days, it's been a while since I've stacked them. I've just been doing psilocybin off and on since then, and I'm still receiving the benefits. So I don't think it's required.
mhm.
But if people are into it, they could try stacking the lion's mane with the psilocybin. But it's really about the psilocybin increasing the neuroplasticity, if that in fact is happening, and changing your lifestyle to help promote healthy brain growth. So you can't just lead a crazy life and take some microdoses and hope that that'll fix everything. No, you have to change your lifestyle too to reduce your stress and reduce your depression and increase your level of happiness. So all the usual stuff, healthy diet, exercise, sunshine, and time with friends and family that who make you feel loved. This is the real medicine.
Mhm.
So
But you
yeah,
mentioned something in there about that there was a couple things that fell away from you. I think it was caffeine and something else.
that's right.
Wasn't
Yeah.
looking for that to happen. That wasn't why you were doing this. You just noticed that all of a sudden your desire for some things had left. And I thought that was an important thing.
Yeah, so I've been a lifelong coffee drinker since I was a child. My mom is from Latin America and is just part of Latin culture. So, when I was this tall, I've been drinking coffee. And then somehow, and I really sensed that this was coming from the mushroom, like, or from my own internal wisdom, that was more that I had more access to, said, that's it with the caffeine. You're done. It's not good. And it's a lesson I should have learned about 6 or 7 years ago when I had a kidney stone, because the doctor said, maybe it's the caffeine. Maybe you need to just focus on water for a while. And I didn't stop. I haven't had another kidney stone since then, thank goodness, because it really is the most painful thing ever.
And
Um,
twice.
oh, you've had them twice,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you'd like to die quickly.
Yeah, really. So this message came through is just a knowing, like no more caffeine. And I didn't have withdrawals. I just knew like I just I'm not going to drink any more caffeine. I switched to decaf because I still love the flavor of coffee.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any withdrawal symptoms or anything. It's just as if my relationship with caffeine had run its course in my life. Not that I would ever that I would never have caffeine again. I'm sure there'll be times once in a while, but my morning coffee now is decaffeinated. But the other thing was I got a very strong message from within that drinking, and I was never a heavy drinker, and I'm not a very social person, so the drinking that I do was mostly with my wife, with dinner or something like that, maybe 2 or 3 times a week. But my body said, even that, no, no more. I still, and I did stop for a good long time, but since then, once in a great while, I'll have something with my wife again, but it's really, really rare. And I always pay the price. It's like my body goes, we told you, no good. Like if you like sleeping at night, don't drink, because it really does wreck my sleep and who knows what else it's doing. But those impulses to drop the caffeine and drop the alcohol, that didn't feel like it came from my conscious self. It came from a deeper aspect of me. And I credit the psilocybin microdosing protocol with opening that up, that communication from within to my own health.
I think that's really wonderful because I think therapists are using this as a method to help people that are having addictions. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think it's, yeah, because of the same experience I had dropping alcohol. I think people can, whether microdosing or with large doses, it can curb that impulse for
It's
people
like
who are.
instead of forcing yourself, it's like a switch changed in the brain or something. It sounds really
Mhm.
great. So,
Yeah. And I think part of it is that there is a great degree of emotional healing that can occur with a large dose of psilocybin. And because a lot of people drink, or what starts off addiction is trauma or emotional wounds. So if we can heal those wounds, which psychedelics help a great deal with, then that really makes it a lot easier to cope with the addiction and to stop the addiction.
because you're getting at the root of the problem instead of
Mhm.
just saying it's just an addiction. You find
Mhm.
out why the addiction is there. It's great work. It's just well needed, and I'm so glad that you're available for clients in Colorado to see you as a patient because they're getting you with a very open, more worldly view on therapy than say ones who might have been in the field for 30 years and are still doing some old methods.
Right.
So really great that you're happy you're in what's the new and the now.
Mhm.
Um, I have a next question for you. I was wondering if you could aside from preparing for a journey by doing these meditations, what other preparations do you mention in the book? Can you talk about the combination of your meditation and your actually, let me go ahead. Let me go. Let me wait on that question. I want to go ahead in
Okay.
front of me. Forget that. I want to first find out about if this book is more about meditation or more about using psychedelics. I finished the book yesterday and I absolutely loved it. And then I went online and signed up immediately for the meditation course that goes with the book here. And I love the fact that the book offers pages for me to enter what is it that I'm doing and keep a log of which meditation I'm following. And the online class, which I'm telling you listeners, you should really check this out. It's so organized and so easy to navigate through.
Mm.
And I myself personally, I've done meditation over the last 40 years, but I haven't been doing any for a really long time, except for like, maybe when someone was passing or this kind of thing. And I really felt like I needed to go back into some kind of a class or be with people or something. And so I got invited into, there was a podcast we had with a Buddhist monk, a couple of shows ago, Di Hong, and they have a Sunday morning, early morning meditation that I've joined, and I'm meditating with a group of formerly incarcerated individuals, and not who I normally would expect I would be doing this with, but I was really craving this kind of a thing, and it's just a small group of 8 or 10 people, and I'm finding that once a week already has helped me.
Mm.
And then I started a qigong on Wednesdays, and that's given me some help because these things were missing in my life. I've been too involved with all of the busyness of life instead of anything that's my own self-care or the things for my own inner self. And when it gets left to the wayside, it's not good. It's really important for me. I mean, I don't know how it is for others, but for me, it's not been good. I need to keep that in my life because that's what helps me with all the other things that happen in my life. and there's plenty of those kind of things. So what I needed next was like some kind of a steady, simple meditation practice. And I love these two things I'm going to, but it's not 45 minutes. And 45 minutes is what I seem to be trained to from all my years of meditating in the past. So I can handle that's like the right amount for me. So I just want to say I've only started the first one, but I'm really planning on following it through, and that it's also a guidance that you can do if you could talk about it. You don't have to be doing psychedelics necessarily with this program, but it's also when I'm thinking I did psychedelics, in the late 60s, early 70s when I was a teenager. We didn't have information like this, to have guidance or just the information you have in your book about what it is to get yourself a sitter for someone to be there with you. We only did it as something you did together as a group, like with your friends and your rock and roll music or whatever, this kind of thing. What you're bringing to the table in this book is a great education on how to do this in a way that's such a positive result for you. So, anyway, I just had to share my input on that.
Thanks.
So I'll go back to my question
Yeah.
here, which is your book more about meditation or more about psychedelics?
Yeah, it's really tough. In a way, I kind of screwed myself writing this book because it is two different books. One is a meditation guide, and the other half is all about how to grow psychedelics and how to use them, how to prepare for them. But they kind of go together. But if someone's just interested in meditation, they could just focus on the first half of the book and forget about the psychedelics and really focus more on the online course, which is currently free. So people just they could go to pathofthegoldenteacher.com and access the course for free right now.
I just
Um,
did that yesterday. I felt like I'd won a prize.
yeah, well, and it's again because I write these books as a reflection of my life. The reason, yeah, I guess I didn't finish my earlier story. I started with microdosing when I was doing dewdrops, that project, the Puharaj project. And
Mhm.
then I did some large doses. And what happened during those large dose journeys was I had the spiritual revelations that I had hoped I would experience years ago when I identified with a certain lineage of Tibetan Buddhism and I was training under a couple different teachers. In those traditions, they talk about, liberation, nirvana, different words for enlightenment. And I really dislike that word. But there's, it's written in the liturgies and in the texts, what's the description of release from suffering and then acting on the benefit of all sentient beings as a bodhisattva. What is that like to do that level of work on yourself? So it's the spiritual goal. And, you know, after years and years of meditating in those traditions, I had little tastes of that, little hints of that. But then during these large doses of psychedelics, it's like the door opened.
Mhm.
Like, oh, this is what the lineages of teachers have been trying to get us to, have been trying to show us. This is what they write about in the books. And I'm experiencing it right now. And for someone who's never had psychedelics or experienced them, this probably sounds crazy, but anyone who has tripped knows that you're in a totally different state of mind. You think differently, you experience things differently. And so I was having these big aha experiences. But I think that what I was experiencing was made possible because of all that meditation training I had done. It's like all of that was getting me close to the cliff's edge, and then I take the psychedelic, and then I take the leap into that. And of course, the experience, fades away. So I'm not claiming to be enlightened or anything like that. I'm just a regular guy, but I'm a regular guy who's done meditation for, at least 20 years, I think, and then done psychedelics. And I'm having these experiences that match the experiences that are described in texts that are hundreds and thousands of years old. Like, this is what it's like to be awake. And the doors opened. And I thought, wow. And the really nice part was it still opened, even though a long time ago, several years ago, I stopped training with those teachers. I left those communities. I stopped identifying as a Buddhist. or as a member of any religion, and just continue meditating in my own way in a non-religious context. And that's how I teach meditation, is non-religiously. And I don't mean to criticize any religion, as including Buddhism or Catholicism, because I was raised as a Catholic. But for me, religion doesn't work. I see too many flaws there. I see too many limitations. I see too many issues of power and control and potential for abuse. And I stepped away from that. But luckily, psychedelics still make it possible to access these profound spiritual experiences and awakenings, which is great because, there's no issue of power and control and abuse from a mushroom. It's like Mother Nature herself can do the job without all this BS that people do to each other when they get into positions of power and control over others, which is how I see that's a big problem with religion today.
And for listeners who haven't watched a show we did together earlier in the podcasts, in the podcast life I have here, um, Sean was like 20 years, I believe, a Buddhist. This isn't something you did for a couple of years or went through a
Mm,
retreats. You were deeply immersed and involved in this, and it was your way of life. So this is not just a passing thing that you did. When you're saying you spent that much time doing it, you were dedicated, and it
mm,
did not take you to the openness or the doors opening up for you until you actually did the psychedelic.
right. And the funny thing too is at a certain point, after I had my experience with the psychedelics, I started looking online, like, is there a connection between, say, Tibetan Buddhism, which I was trained in, and psychedelics? And so I found some interviews and presentations by someone named Lama Michael Crowley. He's a Welshman, but he's a Tibetan Buddhist Lama, and I've never met him. He doesn't know who I am, but I'm a fan of his work because he's written a couple of books about combining psychedelics with Buddhism. But those books are different from my book because of the Buddhist aspect. But I was really encouraged because he's a translator of different ancient languages. He's looked at the liturgies and he's found out that indeed, yes, in Tibetan Buddhism, there has been the use of psychedelics. And even in contemporary Buddhism today, there are some teachers who do use psychedelics with their close students. It's not something you can go out into a public forum and give everyone the mushroom and see what happens. No, you have to do it in a controlled way. But there are teachers today that do it. And there are teachers in the long ago past who have done it. And even in the Vedic scriptures, there's the description of soma, some sort of substance, plant substance that could grant people incredible powers and make them feel godlike and immortal. And I realized that in a lot of the so-called secret practices in Tantric Buddhism and Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhist practices, there's this use of something called amrita. It's a fluid, which means the deathless nectar. I mean, there are other ways to translate it, but it's the deathless nectar. And it's a substance that you use you drink it to receive the so-called guru's blessing. I mean, I sort of think of it as, if for all the Catholics out there, when you go to mass and then
Mhm.
you take the Holy Eucharist, it's a piece of really dry bread, and it's supposed to be literally the body of Christ. And in the case of my training, it was really like sake, Japanese wine or beer, really watered down liquor. That's what we used to take this substance that's been supposed to embody the blessing of the guru and of all the Buddhas, and it's supposed to have a transformative effect on how you perceive reality. And I bet at one point in time when you take the Holy Eucharist, you're eating this very sacred stuff. It's supposed to change your experience of life, but it doesn't happen. In neither case did it happen. And I realized, oh, the real Amrita is the psychedelic. That must be what they used in ancient times because it literally and immediately transforms one's experience of reality to see the sacred nature of everything that is. So it's not just words, it's not just poetic the way it is today, but you take this liquor and you kind of hope you have a change in perception. With the psychedelic, yes, you see the world the way it's described by all the awakened teachers and the liturgies and the traditions. And not just in Buddhism, but I'm sure every culture around the world has a wisdom tradition that shows that there is a quite sacred nature to reality that is invisible to ordinary conditioned eyes, but the psychedelics open up the eyes to seeing what's really underneath.
I think the Huichol people have been consuming peyote for thousands of years, and it's a sacred. I mean, to this day, it's considered a sacred plant used for ceremonial purposes and also for work. Because if they eat just a small amount, it gives them the energy to build the rock wall or whatever the labor-intensive thing is, and it gives the energy they need. And I think that's in a lot of different cultures. And I think some of it's also, like you're saying, either is a secret or was kept disguised, or it became, a little wafer, but really maybe that was something else a long time ago.
Mhm.
So it's wonderful that people like you are researching to find out the things that there's the history of that's been kind of buried in books. I found that fascinating when I read that in your book. I thought that was a really great uh, I was raised by my father raised us as in an atheist environment. So I didn't have any religion, but my grandparents were of the Jewish religion, and we lived in the same house. And I myself also find, and I went to a church once because I wanted to see what went on in there, and I accidentally took communion because my friend said to do it, I didn't know what I was doing, but I've always been curious to all the things, but never felt drawn to any of it. And I don't have judgment on it. If it's okay for those people, that's a good thing for them. It's just
Mhm.
not for me. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and I prefer to get those insights and things from intuition or whatever it is that you're connecting to spiritually. Um, so people can have spiritual experiences on psychedelics without doing any meditation training.
Yeah.
Why do you encourage people to meditate as a preparation for journeying on a psychedelic? Which I think is great advice, but I would like to know about that and if you could tell our listeners.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, there are probably some listeners going, I had mushrooms when I was 20 and it totally blew me open, but I had no religious training or I was not a meditator. Yeah, that's totally possible. But I encourage people to meditate. And some of the meditations included in my course are geared for this to help you prepare, because when someone has an established meditation regimen, so maybe they've meditated for at least several weeks, months, and years, they
Mhm.
gain proficiency working with their own mind. Because it is possible to have a so-called bad trip or a challenging trip and to freak out or to not understand what's going on inside your own mind when you're having a journey. And that's not a very pleasant experience. And that limits the possibilities of what kind of beautiful stuff could come out of it.
Mhm.
But with meditation, for example, you can learn to lift your mood with using, say, a loving kindness meditation or a compassion meditation, where you can tell when your mind is starting to spiral into a negative space. You can notice that ahead of time. You see the patterns of the mind and you know how to pull yourself out of that. So that's one reason, so that you can take that skill you've developed over a long period of time meditating, you bring that strength of mind into the psychedelic experience to
Mhm.
help manage your mind when you're in that altered state. Another reason meditation, a, a path of meditation might help is that you you're able to understand the patterns of mind, how one thought leads to another. And in the beginning, you have to sit with the unknown. You don't know what's going to arise. And that's really for beginners. It's just sitting and what's going to come up. So there's a mystery there, and you're able to sit with the mystery, which takes a lot of patience, a lot of courage. So that's one aspect of the training, being able to sit with the mystery that you don't know what's coming around the corner in your mind. But also, after a while, you understand what is coming around the corner of your ordinary mind because of the mental patterns that you've repeated over and over and over for years.
Mhm.
Both of those types of trainings are helpful during the psychedelic experience because you're able to be with the unknown, because a lot of surprising things happen. But also, when things do show up, you can you can analyze it, you can work with it, you can understand it in a new way. So it's really learning how your mind works on a different level. So there's a lot more potential for insights about what is my psychology? Why do I react to certain experiences in everyday life the way I do? And then you see things from a different viewpoint. Instead of not having any meditation training and not being particularly psychologically minded, you just take the mushroom or LSD or whatever it is, lie down and just be washed over by a million different wild experiences. That it can be fun, it can be illuminating, but when you have this skill at watching the mind, watching the patterns of the mind, looking in between thoughts, being able to manage your emotional state, now you're a skilled operator of your own mind. And combine that with the psychedelic experience, and the fruit that can be born of that is substantial.
I I took my first trip in 1969 when the men were landing on the moon.
Mm.
And my friend and I did mescaline in his basement. And the one of the things that I remember was feeling like we had left our bodies there in the basement and we'd zipped off into the moon at the same time to sort of join the people that were there or something. Uh, and then just a lot of laughter and uh, but when I think about the level of strength of the psychedelics that were being given to us young people, which was going everywhere. It's not like, I mean, it was available at, I couldn't buy a beer or a wine, but you could get any psychedelic drug you wanted. And with none of these backgrounds, none of the teaching that everyone is coming, the awareness that they have now on how to approach these things. And it did end up with people that had bad trips, that had very difficult experiences and were terrified of, psychedelics after that, or the experience of not understanding what's going on because there was no information before you dropped this particular drug or how much of it you should take. So I think that the young people today have so much more information. Your books teach the people how to actually grow the mushrooms step by step so that they can do everything themselves, which there was a thing you discussed in the book I wanted to bring up as well, which had to do with all these people that are running to. I was invited to a peyote ceremony. That's why I was there. I wasn't really interested in taking much quantities of peyote. I just did what was proper to be there as a guest and to be respectful of the ceremony. But there was no way I was going there to have some peyote experience in the mountain by myself at 10,000 feet elevation. That wasn't my idea. But there are people that are going out there. They're running to Peru and Brazil and all these places. And I thought you had some very good input about that. Maybe that's not such a great idea. And I think that if you could talk a little bit about that right now.
Sure.
XR.
Yeah, and really this is just my opinion, right? But I'm anti psychedelic tourism. That's one way to call it, where people travel to overseas, namely South America and Central America, to be with tribes or to go to small villages to pay a shaman, uh, to experience ayahuasca, for example. There's a lot of damage being done to those societies because of the influence of the dollar. And there's a risk to the psychedelic tourists because a lot of people are calling themselves shamans, but they're not. They're not legitimate. And it's hard to tell who's real and who's not. But there's a movie I refer to in my book. I forget the name of it. It might be the Last Shaman. I think it's on Amazon Prime. But there's an example there was a legitimate shaman in a village, but then there was a collection of other people putting together these psychedelic programs for Americans to come down. But he was offering his medicine for free or low cost, and he was a genuine shaman. And they forced him out of the village because he was a threat to what the business they were operating.
Mhm.
And this is all about money and power again. And so, people think flying down there to have this experience, maybe it's helpful for them, but the side effect is it's really doing some damage to the society down there, and it's really disturbing. And I ask in my Blue Thumb book, actually in this book too, why why travel all the way down there for that when you could just grow the mushroom in your living room or in your basement? You could just grow it at home, no damage done to other cultures or societies. And this book shows you how to take it safely by yourself or with a sitter,
How to grow it.
and how to grow it and all that stuff. So that's, and the other thing my book teaches is really how to do it by yourself or with one friend watching you. Because in our culture, there's this thing that I'm seeing online a lot, these advertisements for group sessions. And it's such a cash grab right now with psychedelics as they're becoming legalized. It's becoming a huge industry and it's all about the profit. And you're having people doing group journeys with, say, 12 up to 20 or more people in the same room tripping out. And I think in indigenous cultures where you have it, it's been done for hundreds of years or thousands of years, doing it as a community, yeah, that's legitimate. There's something there. There's a
Well,
container.
actually, even in the culture, I mean, I can only speak for the Huichol because I've been there 6 times and 2 peyote ceremonies, 10 years apart on my peyote ceremonies. And oh, I just lost my train of thought for a second. Oh, and the people there are oh God, I just lost my train of thought. What were you saying about
That's
the
okay. Like doing large groups.
oh, the large groups?
Yeah.
When I was at the peyote ceremony, the group is you are separated. There are the people that are the peyoteros, which there's 36 of.
Mhm.
They and I'm not sure if the spouse joined them or not, or if, I don't think so. It's the 36 peyoteros. All are dancing in in the sacred ceremonial grounds, but any other Huichol or someone like myself, a guest, never dances with the peyoteros.
Mhm.
They dance in a special circle on their own that they're doing continually for close to 5 days, day and night. The other people are joining in and out of a circle. You can sit down, you can get back in. You're not, so you have two things going on. The group that's the peyoteros doing their dance, and then the other. So that is a group thing, but there's a specific group that's manning that peyote. And that's
Mhm.
their job, and that's what they're doing. And other people aren't involved in that. They're not making it, they're not picking it, they're not, this is all this group. So I think that that's where in those cultures there's the respect in the group and
Yeah.
decisions are made in the group. But that's different than a group of people partying together and saying, haha, let's all take a trip, you know.
Right. Well, and even if it's come advertised as, oh, that we're going to do some a healing journey, or this is for psychological wellness, this is a group of strangers. Whereas maybe in Huichol culture, like it's family there. Like
Right.
everyone has known each other for a long time. There's a level of trust and safety there. But I can't imagine going to someone offering, hey, there's 20 people in the room. I don't know any of them. We're all going to lay on the floor in a circle. What if I'm having a really profound insight and I'm feeling sad, but the person laying on the floor next to me is laughing his butt off, and the person on the other side of me is screaming in anger, and it's like, what's happening here? And there can be room for all that, but I think there's a risk there, especially for beginners, to be exposed that way to all these other people, all the energies, and there's maybe one or two people running it. And I think there's a lack of, largely because they're all strangers to each other and because there's a lot of money involved, I question
Yes.
it. I th-
And
Mhm.
I've had this here at my house when I've had different shamanic shamans visit, and we do small intimate events here. But when I've been asked to do ayahuasca ones, and they say, "Oh yeah, we want to bring 20 or 30 people," and I say, "Do you know these people?" They don't know the people even.
Mhm.
And I said, "I
Mhm.
can't open my house to that. I can't allow this many people to come here and do some kind of a psychedelic drug, and we don't know what's going to happen. They're going to go running off in the orchard or run out to the road. I mean, I don't know."
Yeah.
And people have asked me I've had to turn down numerous requests for ayahuasca events here.
Mhm.
And I find that also, to me, that should be an intimate, small circle of people if you do something like that. maybe it's with your closest two friends or
Hmm.
anyhow. So I thought that was something that was important for us to bring up to the
Yeah.
public and for listeners to know about. So let me just go down my little list here. We've talked about preparing, we've talked about stacking. Uh, let's see. We've talked about Peru. I was thinking of Peru when I was thinking about people journeying. Um, Aside from preparing for a journey by doing these meditations, what other preparations do you mention in your book for a person to do to prepare for that journey?
Yeah. There are a lot of things that psychedelics have in common with meditation. So I approach it from that viewpoint. It's like some people think, oh, I need to become more calm. So I'm going to meditate and that will make me calm. But that's not true. What a person needs to do is also apply discipline in their life to pacify their life. Like they have to make changes in their lifestyle and in their relationships. And that combined with the meditation will bring them peace. Same thing with psychedelics. If your life is chaotic, if you're in several hateful relationships, if you're profoundly struggling in a material way, doing a trip, doing a journey will not magically fix it, will not magically fix your problem. So spending time maybe in the weeks or months before your journey to make sure that your relationships are in order, that your sense of self is solid and grounded, that you feel at peace, that nothing could happen at the last moment to cast you into turmoil, psychologically speaking, just to make sure that you're in a really good place, because the psychedelic will not do that work for you. You have to do it in preparation for the psychedelic. So that's really an important piece.
Yes.
And then the other thing is really working with a friend. If you want to have a sitter, if you've never done this before, the book shows you how to train your sitter, or your sitter could just read the book. And working with your sitter ahead of time, not just the day of your journey, but ahead of time, meeting with them, developing trust. And it should always, I really say this should be at least a dear friend, someone, someone who you could vomit in front of, or cry your eyes out. Like it's that level of trust and safety. If you don't mind showing the most embarrassing aspect of yourself to this person, that's the right person to do this with.
Yes.
Which is why I don't understand. I know I'm a therapist, but I'm not really into this seeing a therapist and having a journey in front of a therapist who might be a stranger to you.
Hmm.
That's another reason I wrote this book, is like, because that's the other option that's being offered publicly is, oh, you can now hire a therapist and do a therapeutic session with them, taking psilocybin or any other, or some other, like ketamine or something. But I'm like, but that's a stranger. Maybe if it's a therapist you've been seeing for a long time, maybe there's some trust and comfort there. But still, then there's the expense level. It's really expensive. So I think the best thing is to find a friend, talk about it, prepare for it together, set your goals and your intentions for your journey, and then, prepare the sitter. What do they do while you're having your journey? How do they hold themselves? How do they hold their mind? Where are they in relation to you? What are the rules you set with each other before the journey? Like, is touch allowed? Is hugging allowed? What kind of proximity is appropriate? And other rules like that,
Hmm.
and if and it's good to have a sitter, because you shouldn't drive at all that day. Even if your journey's done, just stay home. But your sitter could run out and grab you some ice cream if you want, or whatever. So they can serve these other roles to keep you safe and sound at home in your own bed or the couch or wherever you choose to do it. But doing it at home, I think, is the most comfortable place to do it. So that's another reason why fly across the world to go be in a strange place. That increases the risk of discomfort during the journey.
There was something else in your book that I didn't even read a question. I don't even have a question about it here, but I did want to ask you about it, and I do have about four more questions. Is um, you write about DMT, and I remember, when I was in the streets of New York, I think there might have been something. Maybe I heard about it here or there. I think they were doing STP then, is what it was. It wasn't DMT. It was something called STP. and I wasn't about to try any of these things. But then when I was visiting at Timothy Leary's house with my husband David, someone came in and offered us DMT. And I was breastfeeding our daughter at the time, so this was like 28 years ago. And I said, I have to pass. I'm breastfeeding. I can't do the DMT, you know. But David, you go do the DMT, you know, have fun. I had no idea about anything about it, and that was 28 years ago. So it's nothing like I ever heard of it again. Nobody ever offered it to me again. And then I open up your book, and it's showing you how to make DMT and what the effect is. And David said it was a fabulous experience. And I'm reading this 10 minute. I mean, I don't know anything about it, and after reading your book, I feel like, oh wow, I wish I hadn't been breastfeeding at that time.
Well, when you come out to Colorado, maybe we can help you with an
Visit,
experience.
yes.
Yeah.
I just was wondering if you could just share with our listeners what a DMT experience is like, because I'm not sure that everyone has been exposed to that before,
Yeah. Well,
unless they went to
DMT,
Timothy Leary's house.
yeah. Well, DMT is the active component in an ayahuasca brew.
Oh.
Um, but but so there are different ways to take it. When you drink it, like in the brew, there's two aspects to ayahuasca. There's the vine and then this other plant. And the vine actually has the, if I remember right, has the MAOI inhibitor, because your stomach has enzymes in it that if you were just to eat DMT or drink it alone, your enzymes in your stomach would break it down. So you wouldn't have an effect. So in
Mhm.
an ayahuasca brew with these two plants, one plant has the DMT and the other one has the MAOI inhibitor. But if you smoke DMT, then you don't need an MAOI inhibitor. It goes straight in and into your brain. And the thing about DMT is it's a natural chemical in the body. It's endogenous to the human body. And actually, other plants and other animals have DMT in their bodies too. So it's natural to us, which means we metabolize it very quickly. So when you eat it or drink it, like in ayahuasca, it's many hours of a journey.
Mhm.
But when you smoke it, your body metabolizes it very quickly. So a journey can be as brief as 3 or 4 minutes, up to 10 minutes, but really just a few minutes long, and then it's done. But it's very fast, it's very powerful. We've all taken those roller coaster rides that you just climb and then and you're just very fast and then it's over. And the DMT experience is like that. It is qualitatively different than I'd say LSD or psilocybin for sure. It's a different experience. It's almost like you're inside of a computer game in a way. It's more digitized, the visual experience of it. And, in the book, I described my terrifying experience that I had. My ego really was gone there for a few minutes. Toward the end, my eyes were open and my wife was nearby watching over me. And I looked at her, but I didn't know if that was me or I didn't know where me was. I looked down at my body. I'm like, is this me? What is that thing over there me? Is that, for a few moments there was no me. I didn't know where the boundaries were. And
Wow.
I always like to recommend people that they listen to, I think it was a TED talk called My Stroke of Insight. And it was given by a woman named Jill Bolte Taylor. She's a, a brain doctor, basically a neurologist or something involved with studying the brain. She's a doctor and she had a stroke. And because of her education and training and work experience, she was able to learn a lot from the experience of having a stroke. And when she describes it in her TED talk, My Stroke of Insight, she talks about her ego dissolving and the boundaries between her sense of self and the rest of the world dissolving. And my DMT trip that I talk about in the book, it was the same way. Like, I don't know where I end and the world begins, which was not pleasant, which was not a ooh nice spiritual.
Right,
No,
right, right.
it was unsettling to say the least. Um, but some people look for that experience, and again, it's hard to find really great instructions online for how to extract your own DMT. So I thought I'm going to put the instructions in this book. with tons of pictures, step by step, because you can, the method I teach is using Mimosa hostilis. It's a tree root from Mexico and Brazil, which you can order online. And then how do you extract the DMT from it? It's a process that takes a couple of days generally. And then
Mhm.
you have more than enough DMT to last you a really long time because it's only a small amount. And so I just wanted to put that in the book as another resource for people because it can result in spiritual insights for some people, or at least insights about the nature of reality and mind and self and what it means to be alive with the human brain. This is giving access to a much deeper level of operation inside the mind.
That's, that's the most information I've ever known or heard about this, and I'm really glad that we got to share this. So I'm going to move on here. Um, let's see. Oh, there was something I read about in your book that I was hoping you could explain. And I believe one was called integration meditation and the other was called intentional meditation. Is that correct? Could you describe what those two are?
Sure. Well, one is just using meditation as a way of forming your intentions for what you hope to experience or for what you hope to find answers to during your journey.
Mhm.
And it's really about the art of thinking, because I think it's becoming a lost art in the modern age when anytime someone has a spare minute, they're doing this.
Yes,
You know,
I
that
know, me too now.
again, they're getting it from the outside. And I think in the book I mentioned Albert Einstein came up with a lot of his ideas through the art of thinking. You just sit still and think for a long period of time using your imagination. And meditation in some sense is like that, depending on what technique you're using. But to really sit down and carefully, intentionally determine, what do I really want from this? What am I seeking? What am I looking for in life and in my unique spiritual development? What am I looking for? And then with the integration meditation, in a sense, meditation is an integration process for daily life. Again,
Mhm.
just sitting still and letting your mind process the day's events, the day's concerns, all of that. And after a psychedelic journey, it's good to give yourself time. I recommend taking the next day off work. Don't journey on a Sunday when you have to go to work on Monday, because you might have some new ideas about your life and existence that could make working at your desk difficult. But also meditating is a great practice you could do after your journey to really soak it in, the experience that you had, to really fold it in, sort it out, how to incorporate it into your belief about your reality, belief about your sense of self. Because if you just journey and then go on to regular life, it's almost like you're missing the most important step of how do you take what happened during those 4 or 5 hours when you use the mushroom. A lot happens, but then there's a lot of thinking about it that happens afterward. And you need to give yourself that time, that quality time to just sit and just process it mentally and emotionally without distraction. So to do a journey and then spend the next day binge watching TV shows it could be an awful waste.
Mhm.
Put some meditation in there where you're just really mulling it over and incorporating it. Yeah.
Yes. Um, there's a quote at the end of your book that says, simply put, meditation makes us more stable.
Mm.
And I think that's a very, I think you have a lot of wonderful insights, and I just love the way you share them because for me, they really speak to me. So let me see what I have left here. I have um, two questions left. There's one here which I think I'm going to take here on our path of the golden feature that we all see here. This is the current book that we're talking about. And in the back, I loved seeing these pictures. I've been given these symbols, by other shamans and things, especially this Vajra one and this God's Eye. And I've never seen these other two. I thought that was amazing. The Helix Nebula, the Eye of God by a dying star. Really
Mhm.
is incredible. And the photos that you put in here is Amazing. But I was wondering if you could talk about this page.
Yeah. So what you're holding up right there are pictures of murals from the fifth Dalai Lama's secret temple, the Lukang. And these people could Google these if
Mhm.
they want to look it up. Just look up Fifth Dalai Lama Secret Temple Yogis, and these will probably come up. But these images are special because they show yogis doing practices related to the subtle body practices of that tradition, which eventually lead, particularly in the Dzogchen tradition, that's one of the Tibetan traditions, to what's called the rainbow body. And this is different from the new agey rainbow body. If you go on YouTube and look up rainbow body, you're going to get a whole bunch of new agey type stuff. This is not that. This is from the Himalayan traditions, the rainbow body attainment, which is not really a goal. It's more a side effect of what happens to a yogi who's been doing particular practices pretty much for their whole life, that at the end of their life, and it's happened in modern times, they have records and witnesses that the yogi dies. And at that point, or yeah, at that point, the body can shrink visibly in size until it's the size of a doll. And so there are photographs of that online where a full grown man or woman has shrunk down to this, but in many cases, the body dissolves completely into light. And there's so many accounts of people who've been waiting or helping this yogi, and they're outside of his tent, and then they're seeing rainbows everywhere, and then they go inside the tent and there's nothing there except the yogi's hair and nails. In some cases the rest of their body has dissolved into rainbow light.
Wow.
So in the Tibetan tradition, that is what the rainbow body is. And I put these images in the book because in the end of that meditation training, the course you just signed up for, I teach some of the practices that can lead to that. Not in the Tibetan Buddhist context. So I'm not trying to pretend to be a Tibetan Buddhist teacher. I'm not pretending to be a Dzogchen teacher,
Mhm.
but I do know a couple of the practices associated with the rainbow body. And I'm not teaching it in the course so that someone actually attains the rainbow body. Because what's the point? It happens when you die anyway. Some people, I see this online, people are like, oh, how do you do that? I want to attain the rainbow body. It's like, you kind of don't, because two things, it happens when you die. And also, when you die, it means you really dissolve your sense of ego. So you, the you that wants to attain it, will no longer exist at that point anyway, if you're practicing in the proper way. But the
Mhm.
reason I teach these practices, they're visionary practices using light, like sunlight or candlelight. You use your eyes a certain way because it helps with improving your meditation, your ability to let go and to release into your deeper awareness instead of your ordinary thinking mind. So that's why I teach those practices. And they're traditionally highly secretive, never ever shared with anyone unless they've, jumped through hoops for years and years and years. But since I'm not in those traditions and I'm not teaching the whole thing, I don't even know the whole thing, but I'm just teaching what I know and what I've experienced myself to get it out there. And in the course, you can't just jump to the end to get to those practices. Like, I put a timer on it. You have to be in the course for at least a year and a half before you have access to those practices. And even then, a person won't be able to do those practices effectively unless they've done the training ahead of time, all the other practices, as much as I recommend in the book. And then they'll be able to actually have real experience. But that's why I put, because what people are seeing in the murals and those pictures you held up, those lights,
Mhm.
I teach how you can actually see those lights yourself. And there are some very interesting things that happen, well, if you practice those techniques regularly. And the sad thing is, I cannot talk about it because if I say something about it, someone's going to build a preconceived idea about it, and it's going to interrupt their actual growth through the meditation practice.
Mhm.
So I'd love to spill the beans about all this cool stuff that can happen when you do these practices, but it would ruin it for the people who are not ready to actually engage in those practices. But still,
Mhm.
for those who get there, if you enjoy my course scale and you practice for a year and a half and you get there and you feel ready to engage in these, the photos in the book are really going to help you because you'll actually see what was drawn on the walls inside the basement of the Fifth Dalai Lama's secret temple. You'll actually see those images. And but what that means will be something deeper. But again, I can't say what it is because that'll actually prevent your actual realization from happening
Mhm,
regarding these practices.
mhm,
So it's a self-secret thing. It's there for those who do the work. They will naturally realize what I'm talking about. But to talk about it publicly and in a context like this, it could ruin it for people, which is why these practices traditionally have been secret for thousands of years. They're only given to people when they're ready. But in the modern age, I mean, our world is in trouble. It's in deep trouble, and we need to get these practices out, I think, more widespread, but still getting people prepared in a good way. But that's a long answer to why those pictures are in the book.
Ah, well, this was a good answer. And and I also think you're right that, and it's not just Buddhism, or it's all these Native American people, all these different holders or keepers of information that really maybe needs to be shared now. And that maybe you're not of that culture, but maybe you are holding something that energetically can help if you have that information. I'm into the sharing thing, that the thing should be shared, but I also agree with you. The same thing. You don't give a person, when you're teaching them just to start learning how to cook, you don't give them a mandolin to go slicing things. They're going to slice their finger off. So you got to start them off with a, just, you have just a knife, or you have to learn how to hold it. And it's no different. And it's also for the protection of the person not hurting themselves.
Mhm.
So it's just, we're just talking about it in that same level.
Yeah.
Um, I just feel like for my own self that I've really needed to have meditation come back into my life.
Mm.
And so the minute I started to think and put it out there, it started to appear for me. And I can't say, oh, you didn't get a door open. The door's opened. And now I'm walking through and doing these. So I feel really good about that. And that it's come to that. Um, so let me see. I have almost all my questions answered. I did have one that was just a kind of a recipe thing, but I thought for people who were doing uh psilocybin microdosing, you mentioned a method of being able to drink it, something called the lemon brew, I think, or lemon something.
Well, lemon tech.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you could share that for any of the people who might be interested in doing that instead of, say, a capsule or.
Yeah. So the lemon tech has to do with taking a large dose, a psychedelic dose. And it's basically because normally, like if I'm journeying, I'll put my psilocybin, I dry it and powderize it, pulverize it. And I like to mix mine with hot chocolate, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I drink it. But some people, maybe they want a shorter and more intense trip. So what they'll do is they'll take a shot glass, put their psilocybin powder in it, and then squirt a whole bunch of lemon juice in it. And it's thought that the acid in the lemon juice starts converting the psilocybin into psilocin, which is what your stomach and liver do if you just drink the powder straight. They have to convert it into the active molecule. So this starts the conversion process ahead of time by letting the powder sit in acid in the lemon juice for a while. And then you shoot it. So you just let it sit for a few minutes and then you shoot it because it tastes disgusting. But you drink it. It also helps with breaking down the chitin. That's the protein in the mushroom, which can, lead to a little bit of nausea. So with psychedelic mushrooms, you're not throwing up and having diarrhea the way you do with ayahuasca, but you can experience some nausea. And some people might vomit. It's a small number, but some people do. But some nausea because of the protein of the mushroom. So in that way, the acid also helps break down the protein and helps the digestion. It makes it easier and reduces the nausea that way. It also shortens the duration of the trip, which might usually be 5 or 6 hours, could make it 3 or 4 hours, but it makes it more intense too, because it's just, you feel it more. Usually for people, when they drink the psilocybin tea, it could take 20 to 40 minutes before you start feeling it. But you do the shot, it could happen faster than that. So
And about how much if you were going to do that type of a dose in the tea, about how much powder would you be putting in that? If you were not doing
Yeah,
a giant dose, if you were just doing
right. Well, and so what I teach people in the book is, since if you grow your own, you have enough to experiment and work your way up slowly to find out your ideal dose. So if I were to say, oh, just do 3 grams, that's a dangerous thing to say, because for some people, 3 grams is way too much.
Mm,
For other people, it's not enough. It's everyone has their own the dose that works for them with a particular mushroom material, because maybe I have a supply that I grew last month and I grow some next month. Well, this stuff might be a lot stronger than what I used last month. So in the book, I teach how to microdose to find your ideal microdose, and then how to multiply that to know what your ideal large dose is. The short answer to your question, though, is let's say if you like to journey with 2 grams of psilocybin in tea, you would
mhm,
use 2 grams in the lemon tech, but just know that it'll be more intense. So you could break it down or reduce it to a gram and a half.
mhm.
I'm keeping these measurements low because I don't want to say something like, oh, do 5 grams, and then
Oh God,
someone
no.
loses their head or something, right? So but in the book, it's, I really encourage people to take it slowly. There are ways which I describe how to safely and slowly over time find the ideal dose for you. People shouldn't be online saying, oh, well, you should do 3 grams. That's what works for everybody. It's not true.
Right.
It's bad advice to give out to strangers. Yeah.
There was also something you pointed out, which I thought was very interesting to add, and that was it's not the weight of your body. Where I've been with people who say, "Oh, well, I'm 250 pounds, so I better have, double the mushroom amount that you're having because I'm so big." And then you point out it's not the body, it's the size of the brain. The weight of the brain is what's being affected. So you're feeding a 3 pound. So, everybody has a different level of what their brain can handle. It's not the actual size of the body. I thought
Right.
very good for some of the people who, I mean, I remember people saying those to me about things. Oh, I better have more because I weigh more.
No.
And I believed that. So, but now we know
Yeah.
that's not true.
Yeah, I mean their body weight or whatever their how their digestion functions could affect how quickly they feel the effect. The metabolizing process might be different depending on your body weight, but it's all going to the same wet 3 pounds inside of our skull, right?
Yes. Uh,
So
there's one more thing I want to mention, and then I'd like to go to if there's what you would like to share before we kind of end our show here. Um, it's just that I have such a terrible fear of spiders. And when you mentioned having a vision of I believe it was a 30-foot tarantula,
yeah,
uh, I didn't, I wasn't sure if I was going to sleep that night. And I was
yeah,
trying to imagine that. Was that a friendly experience or was that a terrifying experience? But I just was trying to, I don't, my experiences was mostly with mescaline, as I said, as a teenager, and it came with lots of colors and this sort of thing, but not a lot of hallucination. And I
mhm,
remember when I took my first little bit of acid, and I think I was 16 or yeah, 16 at the time in San Francisco, Golden Gate Park, the group of hippie people that brought the acid. I remember lifting up the orange juice to take a sip, and all of a sudden a river of orange juice was coming at me like so that's about so I really don't think I experienced a lot of the hallucinatory thing. And when I was imagining your spider, I was saying I don't know if I would be able to survive if a 30-foot tarantula came out to me.
yeah.
I was just wondering if you could just share that story since it made me so like in awe.
Yeah, it was a lovely experience. It was suddenly I was underneath this tarantula that was as big as a room, or bigger, and its legs were stretched, spread out around me. But it was not terrifying. I was not scared. It was like this creature was smarter than we think spiders are. Like there was a communication happening, a knowing. It was looking at me and holding me in its awareness in a certain way. So it wasn't terrifying. But yeah, for me, animals show up in different ways. I've had the rainbow unicorn, as cheesy as it sounds. Like the rainbow unicorn has appeared in my mind. The one that appears most often actually is a dragon.
Mhm.
So dragons appear for me, and they're the most beautiful things. And they could seem like terrifying, but they're graceful, beautiful, loving, wise. They're silent, but there's power in their silence. And I'm not saying dragons exist, but somehow in the psychedelic space, and I'm not a dragon guy. I have no fascination with dragons. I don't watch dragon movies. I don't watch unicorn movies. And for some reason, these mystical creatures are appearing in my mind's eye during a psychedelic journey.
That's
It's
wonderful.
wild. But also like extraterrestrials have shown up and other types of things, and just a lot of stuff, you know, a lot of stuff has happened, but it's all been wonderful. And I credit my meditation training for making it possible for me to experience this in a way that's grounded and
Yeah.
safe and revelatory instead of just random and wow, that was fun.
So I'm finished with all my questions, and this is when I ask our guests if there's any bits of wisdom or anything we haven't covered that they'd like to talk about, or anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners and our audience.
Yeah, I don't have a lot going on right now. What I'm looking ahead to is, I wonder if enough people do the meditation course, because I'll have their email address. I wonder if there'll be interest for me to lead a retreat. I used to lead retreats years ago, and I'm yearning to lead one again. But it's been a long time since I've led a group of people regularly in their meditation training. And so I'm hoping that eventually I'll know enough people doing this program. And then maybe we could do something like go to Estes Park for a week and meditate together, retreat style, which is quite intensive,
Yes.
and not involving psychedelics, just meditation. That's enough. As a group, it's a transformative experience. And I'm wondering if there's potential for that to happen, but I can't make it happen. It's sort of a karmic thing. So my hope is that enough people read this, get the course, I contact them in a year or two and say, should we do a group retreat together? So that's just what I'm hoping for, but I don't know what life has in store for me.
Put my name on the
So,
list. Excuse
okay.
me.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
that was one of the other things I was thinking about was that all of my meditations that, were of a deep level were all done on retreat. They weren't done in my house. They weren't done on
Mm,
Zoom. They were done where I was sitting at, Spirit Rock all day, or I was, 9 days somewhere in some other Vipassana thing or a Zen thing, or so they've always
mhm,
been at a place. And there's something about the energy of a group meditating together in those kind of places that's special.
mhm,
It's it's just something different than when you're doing it alone. That
mhm,
group dynamic of being in silence and quiet, I think is very powerful. So I was kind of missing that. And
mhm.
so to know that you're thinking about that as a possible future thing, I think is great. And who knows what our world will be, in a year, it might be even more needed than it is right now. Who knows?
Mhm, mhm.
And I
Yeah.
do want to say, is that a ring from your father that you're wearing?
It is my father's ring.
I know
Yeah.
I said
Yeah.
all emotional when I saw it, and I said,
Uh,
that's his father's.
oh wow.
I just wanted to say, since we opened with him, I wanted to sort of send him our love and
Yeah.
know that he was with us today.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah.
So I want to thank you for being here today. Are we, do we feel complete now? Are we
I
good?
think so. Yeah. And I'm really grateful that you invited me to talk to you again this way. And it's always a pleasure to chat with you. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be with you. And I just if you could just repeat at the end of the show, even though this will be in the description, could you repeat that the contact where people would go to find your website and also to find the meditation course?
Sure. Okay. So there are two. The first one for my psychic work is mindpossible.com. That's the one you spelled at the beginning. And the other one for this book and the online course is pathoftheGoldenTeacher.com. So
Beautiful.
they'll find all my information or a contact form there. Yeah.
And even though our listeners should know, even though I think that Sean is a golden teacher, that's not the name of the book. It's actually after a mushroom called
Yeah.
the Golden Teacher Mushroom. But
Yeah.
still
That's a
think,
good point. I'm not the golden teacher.
I
It's the
know, but
mushroom. Yeah.
me, you will always be.
Yeah.
So
That's sweet.
just hold on for a second. I'm going to close us out now.
Okay.
I want to thank all you listeners for joining us today. And we hope you've had a wonderful time learning about all these different things in the psychedelic and meditations. And check out our shows coming up. Check out our other shows you might not have seen. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. And remember, share your stories because stories can heal. Thank you. Have a great time. We'll see you soon. Bye.